through 2020, when even as our whole group was isolated from one another, and we would have like, I think, Monday night sort of weekly Zoom meetings to just kind of check in, and we're trying to figure out how to write music and everything like that. So we get on these Zoom calls, and as I'm sure you're very well as you very well know, Zoom meetings could kind of be a drag. So what we would do is we would instead of having our boring studio backgrounds, we would take screenshots of the meeting in session, and then make the screenshot of somebody else's room our background, for instance. So what you see behind me is Nick, who's taking a screenshot of the background of my studio, my art studio, and then superimpose that in as his background in the Zoom meeting. And then I took a screenshot of Nick speaking to me as if he was in my studio, and I've made that my background. Unfortunately, right now I don't have more of these on my hard drive on my computer, but we would go 20 or 30 levels deep, where it just was like a fractal design, where you would see hundreds and hundreds of Zoom meetings superimposed on top of one another. It got very sort of crazy and meta. So let me see if I can find another one. I only have a couple on my.
Well, good to get creative.
But here's one. This is Sebastian as the background, and our front of house engineer Matt Ricchini using that. So it gets pretty goofy. I don't know where this is. This is somebody else's kitchen.
Yeah.
I think it might be my guitar tech's kitchen.
It's beautiful.
But yeah, we'll go back to my studio with Nick.
I think it's
about to say something important. Yeah.
Yeah, he's about to drop some science, drop some knowledge. That's what's going on. So, welcome everyone to the Revolver Fan First podcast. We just had a nice aside into the world of John Baizley and Baroness, and the strange 2 years that separated us all. Now he's on tour, being connected again, which is pretty cool.
It is. It's the best.
How does it feel?
It feels fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
it would be hard to. It's hard to explain how good it feels. Yeah, we are about to play. We're in Atlanta right now. Let's see. So we're about to play the third night of this tour, which is the second leg of a tour that we started last fall. So in fall of 2021. We did like the leg one of this tour through North America, and it's a pretty interesting tour for us. We call it the DYER Baroness tour, because what we've done is we've booked a tour in venues that either we have played and used to play in the sort of early seminal days of the band, or venues that we would play now if we were a younger band. So very, very small rooms, meaning 150 to 300 people a night.
Wow.
Which is as you can imagine, it's tremendously small, and it is, everybody likes to use the word intimate when describing shows like this, but it really is. There's no. In many nights, the stage is six inches tall, or we're simply playing on the floor. Some nights there's not even a PA. Anyway, what happened was with a show like this, what we're doing, we're not taking out any support. So for all the ticket buyers, they get basically a list of every single song that we've ever recorded. And it's like 70 or 80 songs or something like that. And the fans vote for 10 songs in our set list. So the first portion of our set each night is the top 10 songs in the city that we're playing that have been voted for. And that is what I call the A set. We play the B set after that, which is Gina and I'll play a handful of tunes as an acoustic duo. So it's kind of like an intermission for the rhythm section, and like a bit of an ear break for everybody else, because we're playing. Following that, we play our C set, which would be another hour and a half worth of music. So all in all, we're playing set lists that are about 2.5 hours long, with as close to and even showing from each one of our studio records as possible. So typically 4 or 5 songs every night from every record. And we even include songs from the EPs and from the very early days of the band. So it's a really cool tour for us, because it's really forced us to make sure that we know our entire back catalog, and that the songs that we let, that I think occasionally get brushed to the side because they're sort of the deep cuts on the record. We've made sure that we know them intimately well, and it's been cool for us because we realized that some songs have sort of fallen out of our nightly routine, and they're awesome songs. So it's been really fun, because for this lineup, which is like Baroness lineup number 6 or 7, a lot of these songs this lineup's never really played. So it's really been fun to get back into these songs, and I think the crowd really definitely appreciates it.
I love that. Well, okay, so do you then craft the rest of the set list around what the fan favorite 10 is, and then you work out how to balance out the rest of it? So you're
exactly
rewriting a set list, you're completely redesigning a set list every night?
Well, I always do that anyway.
Oh yeah.
One thing. Well, I don't think you have to. I don't think as a touring band, sometimes it sort of flies in the face of common sense and good reason. But I've always felt that it's important for this band to make sure that we don't lose touch with the songs that don't have the highest Spotify playlist ranking, or that don't have the most views on YouTube or wherever. We've always, as we've written records, we always consider the entire album. We don't write 3 songs that feel strong and then put a bunch of filler on a record. So it's always been important to us since day one that we have an eye towards the past in terms of set list, so that there's some variety there, so that we don't get bored, and we don't feel as though we're on a tour marketing that's purely promotional for a record. We do the opposite. We like to think the record is a jumping off point for us to go out and get on tour. And while we're on tour, of course we play our most recent records, but it's important that we play all of our music, because it's important in the context of the way that we do things. It's always important. It's
a reason to see you guys a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, is we tour frequently, and we put a lot into our shows. So it seems like it would be, I would be disappointed if I was a fan of a band that I would see every year or every other year, and that they played the same set every time, and it's just the popular songs. I don't think that people really want that.
No,
I think this tour has given us an opportunity to take that one step further and really to reinvestigate our early material, which has been a real joy to play alongside our most recent material. It's really cool, because while the sound of the band has changed, the songs still fit together fairly seamlessly, and I think that's awesome. That's what I would want to see of any band that I'm a fan of.
Well, you're painting with all the colors of the palette, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Is there any song that you find challenging to revisit emotionally from the early days, or songs that kind of take you back to uncomfortable? Or
yes and no. I think anybody who's familiar with the finer points of our songs and the meanings behind them can understand that typical lyrics that I've written, typical to our songs, is that they're about moments of struggle, or in a lot of cases, the lyrics, when I revisit them and read them, I can see that I'm trying to wrestle with something that I haven't quite figured out. And I think that's what music has always meant to me, and continues to be. So by that measure, going 20 years back in time and playing a song does have that sort of transformative effect, or at least it takes me back there in a nostalgic way. But I tend to think that the sort of cathartic or emotional release that I get from playing the song is part of the reason I wrote it to begin with. So in that way, yes, it is a heavy and often an emotional thing to do that, but that was always kind of baked into the song to begin with, and that's part of the reason that I enjoy doing it so much, is because it allows me to see whether I or not I've learned anything, or just to stay in touch with the experiences that I've had personally, as an artist. And it can be challenging. There have certainly been nights where most obviously some of the songs on Purple still have a kind of depth and emotional challenge for me that if I'm not careful, I can get a bit caught up in it. I can get a bit carried away with it, because a lot of the songs are dark. A lot of on all of our records, there are always some very, very dark songs that have to do with things that I've really had a hard time with, and in some cases still have a hard time with. So but I would rather be on stage performing those songs than not to have them at all. Not to be able to get in touch with myself that way.
Well, and it must be, I guess, the healing element, especially in a room with 100, 200 people, like that closeness you must feel a bit more than like in a really big theater.
For sure. And it's
a personal shared experience than it is in a theater,
Absolutely. And maybe it's not more or less, but it's different. It's different. It's more present. And it's more difficult to step back and get yourself out of it, because quite frequently I'm confronted with the audience by a matter of inches or feet, and
that's nuts.
The other thing about a tour like this, which is so definitely designed for our top tier fans, who really want the 2.5 or 3 hour set list. They know all the material, and so it's really intense. Even after decades of playing this music in front of such a diverse variety of crowds, it can be really intense to see a room full of people who have truly had intimate experiences with these songs and who know the words, and just as a brief aside, we have to be familiar with so many songs for this tour that there are moments where I have to do a little visual check with our audience, because they know the lyrics sometimes with a little more certainty than I do. So it's kind of funny that way. Beautiful.
Oh, you should bring it here. We haven't had any American rock and roll in 2 years. It's really weird.
No. Dude, and we were, well, you might not know this, but just before the US locked down, we were, I think on the day that it locked down, we were 2 days away from flying from the US to Australia. We were meant to do Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. And our gear had been freighted over. Our gear was on your country's shores. And we just had to send it right back. It really was a letdown, because I don't mean to pander to the Aussie audience, but it really is. We absolutely love coming to Australia to tour. I mean, it's just so far away, but it's always so fun. We have so much fun when we're there. It's always been a tremendously supportive country for Baroness. And so to say it was a letdown is a bit of an understatement. I'm still not over it. So I agree with you. We'll get back as soon as we can.
We're all emotionally damaged by the last few years.
So sure.
Now this show, I always actually have the first question. It's just taken me some time to get to the first question.
Sure. Sorry about that.
But I feel like this is a moment in time, and it's interesting to know where you're at and what you guys are doing. Who was the first artist you put on a pedestal?
Oh, for sure it was Nirvana.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm of the age where when they broke, and when they, I'll put it this way. I remember the day that I walked home from school. I was in middle school. I remember getting home from school, putting MTV on, as was my routine, and I remember seeing the video premiere for Smells Like Teen Spirit. And you have to understand that I grew up at that point in my life. I grew up fairly deep in the country, and so I wasn't near a major metropolitan area. There wasn't like a whole lot of music culture happening around me to give me any kind of an awareness of you know, what music I was going to get into. So, you know, it was radio and MTV were like the only exposure that I had to music at that point. And I was young enough that I hadn't quite discovered punk rock in all its, you know, glory at that point. And so when that song premiered, it was the closest thing that I've ever had to, you know, a revelation. It was the huge light bulb moment for me musically, whereby I realized that not only had I been missing out on something up until that point, but I saw music that spoke to me, that resonated immediately. Like, I mean, split second, the moment I heard that song, I just knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I knew that
Frozen.
I could make music. Yeah, we're a little bit frozen.
Yeah.
But it was a, you know, it was a tremendous moment for me.
Yeah.
And in the years that followed that, I and everybody in my small town in Rockbridge County, Virginia, we all, you know, everybody that I was friends with who was musically inclined, we all learned the entire Nirvana back catalog. And that was quite simply how we learned how to play music. So the pedestal that I put them on was not without warrant, you know?
Yeah. He's one of, I mean, just as a songwriter and capturing a moment and being like a different kind of a rock star, like coming out of that kind of misogynistic thing, like as a woman and stuff, seeing this dude who was like this sensitive character, and you know, they were, you know, they spoke out about stuff and they did stuff, like he was a significant guy, and I mean, one of the best melody writers of all time. Like,
yeah, and I maybe, you know, I think there's been times in the career or history of this band where maybe it's slightly out of fashion to be, you know, for us, you know, for a person who's associated with, you know, heavy metal or whatever, just to admit that they liked Nirvana. But I have never been able to deny my connection with that band and how critically important they were, along with Dinosaur Jr., along with Sonic Youth, along with Fugazi, along with the Melvins, and all of the other, and you know, to a certain extent, Soundgarden, like, and Alice in Chains, bands like that were all of that era, and all of whom were doing like what I considered very interesting, very non-standard approaches to songwriting, to composition, to melody. But importantly, inside that particular era of music, you had hooks, you had loud guitars, you had guitar solos, you had the attitude that there, you know, that really impressed itself on me, which was that there didn't seem to be any clearly defined rules as to how things were meant to work. You know, where the prior generations of hair metal or you know, maybe more slightly traditional metal or pop music, or you know, there wasn't really indie rock at that point, but the stuff that was happening underground outside of that scene all felt kind of standard, and you know, like there was a status quo, and then, you know, here's your parameters. If you do this, you're country. If you do this, you're reggae. If you do this, you're, you know, whatever. And then all of a sudden there was this kind of like avant-garde upwelling inside the you know, the Nirvana, Sonic Youth kind of realm, and that was what I needed. That was that aspect of the music I really connected with. And then there's also, you know, the chorus. Everybody in the world knows the chorus to you know, everything on Nevermind. Like, it was the most popular music in the world at the time, and also somehow had that beautiful quality of feeling like it was directed at you, the individual, and me, the, you know, the sort of like teenager or pre-teenage kid who didn't really know how they fit in, you know, in the context of the kids around. Like, I felt at odds with my peers. I felt at odds with a lot of the things that were happening around me, and I didn't know why. But I did understand that the music offered me some kind of release from that, some kind of, it was a place that accepted me. And you know, Kurt really, like, and you know, I think everybody of that era has this experience, but it felt like he was talking to me, and I was listening, you know, and I was listening, and the message that I got was, you know, an individualistic one. You know, you with your creative impulses and your energy, do what feels natural. Trust your instincts, trust your gut, and don't don't listen to the, you know, the orthodox people out there who are going to, you know, say, you know, this is a phase for you. Because I wasn't like a talented musician. That was the other thing. Is like, I had some like visual art proclivities, and that came pretty easily to me. But as far as music, I didn't. It took me. It's still a tremendous amount of work for me to be a competent musician, and it's just through routine and practice and nonstop touring that I can like hold my own as a musician and singer. But it was because of Nirvana that I realized I could do it, and it gave me the confidence and the strength to just try. Yeah.
Well, creativity is arduous, but I guess they're kind of outsider anthems that maybe can drive you to want to respond. I guess it's like call and response, like have your
and that's right. And so I've always, whether or not I've been able to admit it, I've always thought that would be the highest level that I could reach, would be to become a musician who inspired that in some small portion of the music listening public out there, to try to be part of, you know, the flow, the ebb and flow of you know, music and arts and culture, and just to be in a position to potentially inspire in the way that I was so definitely inspired as a young budding musician. That's always been you know, a thing to shoot for, a thing, you know, an aspiration.
Well, you can hear it, like, you know, just the emotional resonance, I think. Who was the first artist you saw yourself in, or is that Kurt Cobain and Nirvana?
It definitely was Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
Like, and part of that was because of the way that the music, that I responded to his music, but equally important for me as a musician was the fact that I learned, like, he was the first artist whose music I learned, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think, it probably was Smells Like Teen Spirit, because my routine at that point was I would like rush home from school to turn on MTV before my parents were around and telling me to turn it off, and I would sit there with a guitar and I learned how to play my instrument through MTV.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just Nirvana, it was like whatever came on. It's just that Nirvana songs, you could hear it and you could learn how to play it, and then most importantly, we would play those songs, and in a sort of strange way, for, you know, like a 12, 13-year-old kid, like, you felt like they were your song because, you know, because Kurt Cobain and Nirvana had taught me their music and given it to me in a way that felt like a gift. And so me and, you know, my group of friends who and I mean, we all learned every part. I could play the drums, bass, guitar, and sing every one of their songs, because depending on who was over at my house in my basement where we had the band set up, you know, not everybody was at the same level. So if this guy could sing the song and this gal could play the bass, then I did not play guitar, drums, or whatever. We just kind of rotate around. But in doing so, we really got inside the music. And after a certain point, you're singing these lyrics that you didn't write, this song that you didn't write, but it feels like you. And so I learned at a very, very early age how to, like, emotionally inhabit these songs, and it definitely gave me a sense of how to use raw emotion in a musical way. Because that was always easier for me to say, here's the emotion, here's the feeling of the music. Now let's figure out a way to make that feeling or that emotion musical, rather than here's a scale, here's all the right chords, here's like something the technical thing was something that was like a byproduct of growing as a musician, I think.
Like an emotional reverse engineering or something.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, except with the exception of the fact that it didn't feel like reverse engineering. It felt like the only way you did it.
Sounds cold.
It's just that I
constructed, and yeah.
Because like, you know, for a lot of the kids that I was in middle school and high school with, they would take more formal lessons, or they would learn forms more strategically and in a more coordinated way. where mine was just kind of like a stumbling, grasping in the dark until something works, and then you do that, you know.
That's art though, isn't it? Stumbling.
I think so. But I think that's how I'm wired. I think that's the only way that things make sense to me anyway. So yeah.
Now you were a musicals kid. How did discovering this stuff affect your love of that sort of world? And did you have to kind of distance yourself from it when you kind of found this other kinds of music, or is that kind of long gone?
Well, I was exposed to so many musicals when I was a kid because my mother was like, she truly was a huge fan, you know, like especially the Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals, but you know everything, and so it wasn't that I loved them, it was just that I knew them, and they were part of what I heard frequently, you know, in the same way that like I also knew a lot of Billy Joel or you know, whatever you. So I think that it was something I never really claimed as an influence, but it was sort of hard. It became hard to deny many years later when there was this kind of theatric or dramatic presentation, and it's like, okay, well, where does this come from? And only in hindsight can I, you know, like sort of only retrospectively can I see where that element of our music most definitely comes from. But at the time, you like, I would have shied away. I would never have admitted that as a young musician, not at all.
It's funny. I mean, you can't. I mean, we're just, the cloth gets dipped in stuff, and we can't really. It just comes out, and you wring it out again. That's a weird way of putting it, but
no, I get it. Yeah.
What was the first music that you found that you had a strong reaction to that wasn't love?
That wasn't love?
It wasn't love. That was like, oh, I don't get it. I hate it.
Oh, well, I think when I grew up, as I said, in the Appalachian Mountains in Shenandoah Valley in southwestern Virginia, where pop country was a huge thing. And so, and in the town that I grew up in, at the time, you know, in the early 90s, there was a real emphasis with like the next generation up from me, with like sort of jam band music, like, you know, like the Dead and Widespread Panic and Dave Matthews. Dave Matthews Band is from like 45 minutes, an hour away from where I grew up. So there was this, and I, you know, there was a couple small colleges in the area where we grew up, and so the colleges would constantly have these, you know, just really, touchy feely. But the strange thing is, and I hate it, you know. So again, when I discovered Nirvana and then subsequently discovered punk rock and got into the, like, I got, within 6 months I was in like a tape trading, record collecting, fanzine buying world. Like I just knew it was what I wanted. You know, I just knew that was the shoe that was fitting me at the time. So, and that type of music seemed so counter or so anti like jam band mentality, so anti like pop country commercial kind of sellout nonsense that I had something to work against, which has always been a good motivator for someone like me, is to feel like the music that I'm making can stand in opposition to something that I think is superfluous or vapid or bad, you know. However, you know, as irony works, you know, the things you're exposed to when you're young do leave a mark. And at this point, it would be hard for me to try to tell. I mean, I can admit that quintessential aspects of the Baroness sound have to do with country music, not necessarily pop country, but I am admittedly a huge fan of the, you know, maybe the older generation country music, folk music, Americana, stuff like that. So that strangely then became, and you know, where I grew up in Virginia, bluegrass was a huge thing there, and I was never a good enough musician to play bluegrass, and I didn't really like it as a kid. But there are trace elements of that are so baked into the Baroness sound, it's hard for me to deny them. Similarly, we have always had this kind of open-minded approach towards jamming and improvising within the context of our music. So no matter how much I disliked it at that age, I also absorbed it in a way. And I've always found that for the things that I dislike, the things that I don't love, as you say, I try to find elements in those types of music that I can use and make my own, and by claiming some authority over those things that I dislike in other, or that I shy away from in other music, I feel like that's the appropriate, sophisticated way of disliking something, is to find out what you can take from it and make special to you, you know.
Pull the viscera apart, just grab the organ you like and use it. What you've been with Gina now for 5 years in the band, which is nuts. That seemed to have happened quickly. What do you bond over the most? Like, what do you share a passion for, and where do you diverge? She changed you?
It would be really hard to say where we diverge, because we probably more so than Nick or Sebastian, she and I had our musical tastes align almost seamlessly, you know, whereby 9 times out of 10, if she suggests something to me, I do love it, and vice versa. So we really have a close musical kinship based on taste, because, you know, she comes from a more like definite metal background than Nick or Sebastian or myself. You know, even I'm a little, you know, I would say that my earlier instances, you know, my earlier musical tastes were more punk rock than anything. But you know, she and I both love old country. We both love like, you know, folk music, has similar tastes in like some of the more kind of outsider music that we listen to. But we, you know, in terms of contemporary, you know, the contemporary punk, hardcore, metal stuff that's going on, we really, it seems like we really align on just about everything. So it's really nice because of that, our ideas flow back and forth very, very quickly and very fluidly.
So you've just made what, 30 songs or something? Just made an absurd amount of music.
I mean, we started so many songs over in 2020, really, and then towards the end of 2020 and into 2021, we recorded 10 or 12 of them, and then since then we've been refining those to an album's worth of material, which we're getting dangerously close, but getting dangerously close to finishing, but which has taken a ridiculous amount of time to get fully inspired and to follow through on. However, when we're done with this current record, we will already have done some of the major leaps and bounds with whatever the follow-up is.
Yeah, because you're ending the whole color period.
That's what we're doing. Yeah,
that's exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah, it's exciting to do something new.
Yeah, the rainbow is wrapped up.
It kind of feels like if we were like, even as clever as we could be, if we pushed that particular specific idea any further, it might seem like we were reaching, and it might not, and it might be reaching just for the sake of keeping some consistency. And it doesn't. It felt like
time.
Yeah, it felt like time, and there was a couple different things that led me to believe that it is time. The first and most alarming thing is this will be the first record that Baroness has ever released following a record with the same lineup. We have never done 2 consecutive recordings with the same personnel.
That is nuts.
It is nuts.
I'm
sure it's my fault, you know.
You've been around.
I'm positive I'm a hard person.
Yeah, you're the problem.
To stay with somebody.
On the color thing, were you a vivid dreamer? Because sometimes I feel like
I was an am, you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've had enough major traumatic life experience that the the idea of dreaming it's a double-edged sword, you know. Like vivid lucid dreams can be tricky when you live things, or when, you know, when your mind goes somewhere dark in a creative dreamscape kind of way. So yeah, I would say that I am a vivid dreamer.
Yeah, because it feels like some of your characters are dreamy. They seem to come like otherworldly animals from the night times.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, they do. They're from the netherworld. And
yeah.
So visual art came easier to you?
It came more easily, and it came at an earlier age.
Yeah.
But I've spent, you know, I'm an adult now, so I've obviously spent some time thinking about it. And I think the more appropriate way of me putting it is that I've always had a need, a compulsive need to create things. It's the only thing I do in life that brings me peace, quiet, calm, and certainty, and everything else is just completely out of my grasp. So it sort of stands to reason that, and we all do this. All human beings do this when we are young children. We make images. We start to create things visually because it's simple to do, you know. So it's just to say that I became visually, or I had my visual facilities earlier than my musical facilities, because that's kind of the natural order of things, you know, generally speaking anyway. And, you know, music, I think, it requires a little bit more learning for a child to create a song than it does for a child to create an image. We are all driven to do that. So I think it just was sort of the normal natural order of things.
A hard wiring, yeah. Well, have you put much thought into what the visual and the conceptual element of this new material will be, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it comes into focus as it gets closer to completion.
Yeah.
The way that I work is, it's not it's difficult for me to structure things. Everything is a reaction. Everything happens in the context of something else. So as as the lyrics come more into focus, and as the overarching theme of a song or of a record comes into view, I get my first and most initial impulses to create a visual world, and then much like the way that I write music, that visual world typically starts off with some definable, quantifiable, knowable things, which I then let inspire immediate reactions and sort of like split-second decisions to create that bigger world. And I think that's maybe where some of the more abstract, sort of dreamy elements come into play, is that, and this isn't something that I try to do. I'm analyzing it after the fact. Yeah. It's just the way that I work. I can occasionally see the forest through the trees, but I just let everything, I literally let everything happen as naturally as possible, and whenever inspiration and whenever the mood strikes. Yeah. And I do, there's a whole critical analysis, analytic period that happens early on in like the visual side of things, similar to music. Like for instance, when we start writing a record, we throw out bold terms and ideas that aren't so specific that they'll like landlock us in one style or one realm or another. But once you've had that initial discussion, you don't have it anymore. You just move. Yeah. And you sort of let the music guide you. It's much the same with the visual art, where I will do some research. I'll come up with some things that I'm interested in. I'll make some sketches. I'll start writing like small visual poems and sketches. Just really, really abstract things with what I think are really concrete ideas. And then once I've gotten some of that out of my system, I'll start working on the big piece, and it just sort of radiates from the set. I'll put something in the middle, and everything sort of grows out from there, because I'm just the sort of person that I just take empty space and fill it with as much as I can. Yeah. It's not because I want to. It's very obsessive. It's very compulsive, and I always had an extreme amount of jealousy, and for people who are designers who can make those simple, beautiful, crisp, clean, simple images. Like I think Jake Bannon from Converge, I think he's fantastic at telling this really full, beautiful, and bold thing with just a simple image, or something like like the way that when you see the prism for Dark Side of the Moon, just a simple thing that tells you the whole story, or
Yeah.
even the Misfit skull. It's just you see it and you know the whole world of that music from there.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just layers and layers of embellishments and meanings and metaphors and figurative things. It's just like weaving the most dense, complex tapestry in 4 dimensions at a time, and it barely makes sense. It's just subconsciously.
Yeah.
I abhor the idea of a vacuum, and I fill empty space until it's so confusing that I feel comfortable.
Well, no one else does it like you do. And that's
no. I mean,
no one
and
does
this
it at all, and that's why I wanted. That's the great thing, and that's why you know your artwork instantly, because
right.
And that it's so interesting seeing people's brains splattered on the page. And
I kind of wish it wasn't that case sometimes. Sometimes I'm just like vomiting up all my subconscious, and I'm glad that I'm glad that it's hard to decipher, because when I see it, I sometimes look at some of our album covers and I'm just like, I can see what a mess I was at the time when I made it. But fortunately, again, it's just there's so many layers of things on top of one another that it truly is hard even for me to parse through everything and decipher exactly what's going on. But yeah, I mean that's also why I consider what I do art as opposed to craft or commercial, something commercial, because it always, the only litmus test that I apply to things is does it feel genuine? If it feels real, whatever format it takes, then it's fine. If I have the reaction that I need to out of music, lyrics, artwork, you name it, then then it's art. It's just that easy to define. And for all of the sort of obsessive thinking and analysis and criticism that does happen at certain points along the process, it's very much everything. I like to think that everything I do, or everything that we do, is a natural step from the each step is followed by and preceded by a very natural step. It's just they have to be unique steps. Our music has to feel uniquely like Baroness. The album covers have to look uniquely like they come from me, because in order to try to move that in any other direction has always been a disaster. And by that, because of that, I feel like we're able to incorporate and absorb anything that we want to in a relatively natural way. I mean, I'm not saying we don't make mistakes. I think the whole point is that you try to move beyond your capabilities. You try to be limited only by the absolute limits of your own imagination and creativity, and just always overextend yourself to a certain extent. And that's how you grow. You just grow outwards from the center, instead of the more linear thing that I think some artists do. And it's just it's not saying, I'm not ever saying that one way of working is correct and one way is incorrect. It's just that for us, it's this chaos of color and idea and concept and things we don't think we're capable of doing, and we we do them so hard with so much enthusiasm, with so much passion and spirit, that we will eventually learn how to do them correctly.
Well, it must be great doing that second sequential album with the same people, because you've got that, you've kind of gone down.
Yeah, I mean,
and you can find each other's edges, you know, and you have more defined concept of each other's edges and going beyond the edges, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful part of that is that everybody has to, you know, we as a group, our chemistry has had to have grown, and we've had to learn how to anticipate each other's moves so that we can operate as a singular organism rather than for individuals contributing to one thing. So, you know, as this lineup's developed, and I mean, you know, I think for the four of us, we all feel like we finally, you know, struck it. Like this is a core group of people, and we love each other, we respect each other, we trust each other, and we drive each other to be better than we are, and we're constantly trying to impress each other, but only inside the context of this kind of groupthink, where we have, you know, maybe an abstracted goal, or we have something fairly hard to define but easy to say, and yeah, well, I don't know, I got lost in that thought a little bit, but it's just the idea that one of us could start a sentence, the next person could contribute the next few words, the next person the next few words, and by the end, the four of us have created, figuratively speaking, a full sentence that's coherent and would have been said by any one of us, but all four of us are capable of saying it together. We breathe together. The music ebbs and flows as naturally as it can, and that's something that's really hard to develop. You're really lucky when you find yourself in a situation where you have bandmates or artistic collaborators where that is the goal. You're even luckier when you feel it happening, and when you know, in more recent years, as we've really put ourselves to task, and you know, honestly, through the pandemic, we haven't had an audience, we haven't had outside opinions, so we really, you know, in our rehearsals, we just face one another and close our eyes, and you know, whether it's a hard song or a soft song or something more improvised or something more rehearsed, it's just about learning how to play as a unit, and learning how to, once you've learned how to play technically as a unit, then you'll learn how to take the ideas that you're shooting for and find them musically as a multi-limbed organism with essentially one heartbeat. You know, I know it's kind of, now I'm speaking kind of abstractions, but it's wonderful, and you know, I think every lineup of this band has had some version of that. It's just that this, now that we've got Gina, Nick, and Sebastian, I think we realized that internally, you know, and it's been a really beautiful thing to develop. Whether or not anybody hears it is like kind of immaterial at this point. Like we've just finally struck on a newer, deeper level of chemistry that is really exciting to explore.
That's beautiful. This multi-limbed character, like, makes me think maybe you could go down an animal path. Colors are cool. Maybe the next thing is just weird beasts. I'm just throwing out there.
See. No. You'll see. It's.
You take the leadership.
I think
you could have like a whole. You would make great wildebeests, like wild, like really intricate ones with like wings and teeth and the whole. Just putting it out there. John. Like,
yeah, no. But I think the important thing that we've realized is that while we may be abandoning a specific concept, you know, serial concept that had, you know, six different outcomes, we don't want to abandon the idea of thinking in those terms. Meaning, I don't think it's of any interest to the group that we do like a single album that's got its own like self-contained concept. The whole thing is a project that continues to unfold before our eyes. So whatever however we present it, it's in the tradition of the of the idea that the things that have come before it are quintessentially part of what it is, as are, you know, the things that are more likely to follow.
That's one of the great things about Baroness's story arc, and I guess why people kind of can vibe with your whole back catalogue, because there is this thread.
Yeah.
You feel like there is a whole sequence, and that's why people can kind of latch in at different points. Okay, so we ask everyone one question, which is 5 songs that changed your life, but I would also like 5 visual artists that change your life, which is
man, okay, 5 songs that changed my life.
I always drop this on people and they're like, thanks for no notice, that was great, thanks, but it's interesting.
Okay. Oh man, okay, so 5 songs. Well, obviously, you know, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, Smells Like Teen Spirit was a song that 100% changed my life for the better. I won't say that it's not my favorite Nirvana song, but it's the one that got me. Oh, who knows? It's a big category, yeah. But that's the one that, you know, effectively changed the course of my my musical career. And then I think, you know, at the next stage in my life, discovering Neurosis was, as many people know, of quite a huge deal for me. And so always on the list of like top 5 songs of my life is Stones from the Sky from A Sun That Never Sets by Neurosis. It was just the song that clicked with me in such a way that it changed the way I viewed music. Another, I'm just trying to, it's easier for me to talk about this kind of stuff in terms of albums, but another, I guess, and these are all kind of obvious, I guess sometimes they're kind of obvious songs, but like Shine On You Crazy Diamond by Floyd was another hugely important song that it showed me something about it. It taught me so much about the way music is, and that band in particular taught me and inspired so much of the way we carry ourselves, the way that we approach music in terms of an open mind and an open heart, creating music with an emotional resonance, with a willingness towards poetry and abstraction, and maybe just like an attitude of never playing by the supposed rules. It was, like here's a band that puts out a record that's like 4 songs long, and they're all really lengthy songs, or they're just it's kind of all over the place. And I've always really appreciated about Pink Floyd, about Neurosis, about Radiohead, another huge band for me, because much like Nirvana, much like Neurosis, much like Pink Floyd, the songs are catchy. They're songs in a traditional sense, and they're songs with melodies and beautiful soaring instrumental moments, and also it just doesn't seem to fit in any particular category other than its own, which I've always appreciated. It's just kind of hard for me to know which song, but the common theme is that these are bands that I think at the time that they were becoming popular were all thinking forward, in a huge way. So I'm trying to think of something more recent that I can put in this list. But let me also say that when I was young, Fugazi's 13 songs also had a profound effect on me. Yeah. Because as I've mentioned, I was really invested in the punk and hardcore world, and in that world at that time, I think Fugazi was kind of this outlier. They were like one of the most popular bands in hardcore, but they didn't seem to play by any of the rules of the genre, the orthodox genre. They seemed to have this real intent to be known as artists and to create musical art that had social, political, and artistic elements to it. And I was always really, it was just bands of, I think there's a common thread between all of those bands, and I think that it's important notice what that is. It's just that sort of, when I guess I could put it best this way. When I was young and I got involved in punk rock, the idea that appealed to me most was that it was where you were supposed to be an individual, supposed to be yourself. I think in any scene, you very quickly come up, because it's a scene, you come up against the boundaries of that scene, and you realize that there are rules. There's a way you dress, there's a way you think, there's a way you act, there's a way you do this. But I like the idea that you didn't have that you didn't have to do that you could be sensitive and masculine, or that you could be feminine and not quiet, or that you could be creative and also write pop songs. I think that that's the kind of thread that goes through a lot of those bands, is that you don't have one thing that you are doesn't necessarily come in contrast and contradict another thing that you are. You as an individual and as an artist have the obligation to show how well-rounded you are, how three-dimensional you are, and how your sensitivity can feed your anger, and how your anger can lend new layers of depth to the bittersweet elements of your music. How,
Beautiful.
Yeah, anyway.
I'm just poetic. You're being a bit poetic this morning or this afternoon, wherever we are in the world. It's a really interesting, I don't think a lot of times people have drawn a line between Floyd and Neurosis and Nirvana and Fugazi. You have one more to go.
Yeah. Oh, I said Radiohead.
Oh, Radiohead. Yes, sorry. Yes. Yeah. Radiohead.
And I'll say that those have been sort of my go-to bands. I mean, there's others. There's Portishead, Massive Attack, in that sort of realm, or more recently like Amun-Ra or Converge, or Sonic Youth from the 90s. Like, just I need me, and of course I should have mentioned this, but Flaming Lips have always been another one of those bands that just shows they just show you how creative you can be as a musician with whatever tools you have at your disposal. You can use them to create something that's never been heard before, or put it in a context that it's never been heard in before. And I have the utmost appreciation for bands whose style is their own, whose genre is their own, and whose scene is entirely their own. And I'll say, I think that may exist in some small quantity with Baroness.
Oh.
It's this kind of cool double-edged sword where nobody really knows what to think of you, so they have nothing other to do than to like you or dislike you based on the merits of your music. Because we don't really find ourselves allied with any one scene or the other, we don't have to worry about how that scene's going to react to what we do. I mean, we certainly have come from scenes and we have been part of them, and I really appreciate that, but that's not to say that we're like tied to any one thing in such a way that it's going to affect the way we do things. If we want to write an acoustic record, we can write an acoustic record. If we want to do a record that's primarily synthesizers, we could do that. I mean, I'm sure that no matter what path we set out for, we will do our best to make that an interesting, unique, and very personal experience for ourselves and for the listener.
Like, your context is mutable, kind of, can be a million things. Yeah. Okay, I have to ask, what's your relationship with heavy metal? How did you, as a punk rock dude, how did metal, is metal a part of your heart and soul, and how does...
Oh yeah, absolutely, unequivocally, yes.
I haven't talked about that, and I feel like it's important too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I tend to like, if I'm on a podcast or whatever that I think is for metal fans, I tend to avoid the metal thing, and vice versa. But no. I mean, obviously, I should make a huge point of this. I've always, since my early 20s, I've always been a huge metal fan. I just started off in punk, and I did, I always thought when I was a teenager in high school, I thought metal was like too technical I felt like there wasn't enough feel to it. I love Slayer and I love Metallica when I was young, because I felt like they had songs with hooks, and I felt like the mood that they had, the attitude that they had was like they're in spades and had something really cool to it. But then when I moved out of my hometown and went to college, I was exposed to metal that wasn't just the sort of stuff that you heard on the radio, or the sort of stuff that was like really popular already at that time. And I remember, I think one of my punk friends played me "Hard Work" by Carcass, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is amazing!" How wrong I just remember thinking how wrong I was to have like written off a style of music like death metal, because I didn't think there was going to be anything that I liked in it. And I mean, I would say within a year I was like exclusively listening to death metal, and I've always been really invested in metal. We've toured with as many metal bands as would have us. I would say that at this point in our career, some of the most fun shows that we ever play are metal festivals, whether they're in Europe or like we're doing a Desert Fest in Brooklyn, New York in a couple months that we're really excited to play. But like when we play Hellfest, it's like the most fun thing, because we're definitely not the metal band of the day. We're like, I don't know how people see us, but it's really fun to play those festivals, because we have those connections, we have those roots, and we have I'd also say 90% of my friends in the music industry are in metal bands. So it's never very far from it. We listen to tons of metal, Gate Creeper, Blood Incantation, you name it. Like there's a lot of exciting stuff going on right now in metal that we all get behind. I think I would say one band that the four of us in Baroness at the moment have in common, one of the bands we bond over the hardest, is Meshuggah, which is kind of strange because no, it's not strange. They're awesome.
They're coming on next. Meshuggah.
Say hi to the Meshuggah guys. We love those guys. That was one of the strangest and best pairings that we ever had on the tour that we did, was Meshuggah, Baroness, Decapitated. It was. We did not think we thought it was going to be completely bonkers, but it was such a fun tour.
That's great. That's a great lineup. I love it when everyone is bringing a completely different ice cream flavor to the table, and that is definitely some different ice cream flavors. But I think metal for sure more open-minded than people think.
I mean, that's I think why we've found such a comfortable place for ourselves in the metal community, is because they seem to have the most, our metal contingency seems to be the most loyal fan. I mean, they are the most loyal fans that we have. They're the most dedicated. There are fans who go the deepest into what we do. And I think, there was kind of a joke in our earlier days. It may still be the thing, but like we were always known as like the band that, these sort of like tough, like death metal guys, like their girlfriends would always like us, and we drag these like, brutal, true cult guys out to our shows. And I think it was really, I think it was meant as an insult to us frequently, but whatever. It's like I've never been interested at all in making music that is for someone specific. We've always been more interested in making music, writing the music that we want somebody else to write. We try to write the music that we haven't heard yet, that we wish was being written.
Yeah.
So it's very much, we write for ourselves and very much hope that and trust that will translate.
3 visual artists that changed your life.
Rembrandt.
Yep.
Caravaggio. And I'm trying to think of another one. And Monet. Wow. Pretty traditional.
They are pretty traditional, but intricate.
Yeah, no, I grew up when I was a kid. My mother would take me to art museums all the time, and when I was really young, we lived in Philadelphia, as I do now. and the museum there has so much great expressionist artwork that it left just an indelible mark on my, creative soul. Having toured, for the vast majority of the past 2 decades, I've been fortunate enough to have been to just about every major museum in the world, and I can't help but get completely blown away every time I walk into a room that contains a painting by Rembrandt. It's just, I don't know. It's like running into it's like I remember I was in the art museum in Vienna, and I came around this little corner and came face to face with a self-portrait of him, and it like pushed me back and like knocked me back and took my breath away in such a distinct way. It's just crazy to have that experience with something. So and so every time I'm confronted with an original Rembrandt, I have the same, like I almost can't catch my breath. My heart starts beating, and my eyes well up with tears. It's like a really intense experience, and similar with Caravaggio, whose work I haven't seen quite as frequently as Rembrandt or Monet. But yeah, I mean, I think the list, those 3 artists in particular have always been favorites of mine. But
yeah,
I really just have such a nice time as a touring artist, being able to visit so many museums and to come in contact with so much great and historic art, and to be inspired so constantly and so frequently, because I really do. I love contemporary art. I love postmodernist art. I can't get enough. I really enjoy the experience of walking through these like sacred buildings and absorbing as much imagery as I possibly can.
Yeah. Isn't it great to find the things that totally blow your hair back? Like some people have never found things that push them across the room. Like some people will never find that. Some people will never know what it is to be bowled over like that. So it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And to
more contemporary artist, the guy artist called Anselm Kiefer.
Yeah.
Whose work also it terrifies me and astounds me every time I see it. It's just and that's not to say that it like only like museum worthy art is like impacting me like this. It can happen on the streets, like you sometimes see something that's done by a street artist that has that same kind of impact, or you sometimes see folk art when you're out in when you're out in more rural areas. It's just staggering. I'm just such I'm a soft target for emotionally resonant artwork. It like music that's got that kind of heavy emotional quality to it. Artwork, cinema, literature. I'm just an easy mark.
You're just an open circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's beautiful.
Pretty much.
Yep, that's early. That was a ridiculous thing to say. Okay, your musical Mount Rushmore, the 4 faces carved into the stone. I mean, probably, so like if you had 4 heads that were this is the John Mount Rushmore, the 4 leaders in your music.
Okay, well, I'm not. These questions are so weird and defining. I'm going to do on this just guitar players.
Yeah, do it. Go on.
John Frusciante.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite guitar players of all time.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Johnny Greenwood.
Yeah.
Maybe they can all be John. Maybe they can all be Johns.
Yeah. Go on.
John. Jimmy Page live on Danish TV in I think it's 72. There's this one performance where he's just like a total wizard on the guitar. I love that. I feel like I'm forgetting one guitar player that I love. So many. Yeah, the musical Mount Rushmore is difficult.
I want to get them built. I want to just go. I mean, it's probably terrible for nature if we had. But we've had 31.
Why not Kurt Cobain? Because Kurt Cobain,
that makes sense.
The guitar solos that he does, are some of the best guitarists. I mean, unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
I just love. It takes so much at this point to be impressed by a guitar player, you know, because there have been so many classics in the, through the 60s and 70s, so many classic players. I desperately want to find a new guitar sorcerer. I'm not sure who it would be at the moment,
Yeah.
I feel like the idea of being a solo guitar player or just being a standout guitar player has really kind of taken a back seat in recent years as guitars have kind of gone out of fashion.
Yeah.
In the main, the mainstream world.
That's true.
But like for instance, like St. Vincent, like Annie Clark, she gets pretty close to like absolutely mystifying me the way she plays guitar.
Really?
Kurt Ballou from Converge is another one. He's just, it's hard for me to understand how he makes his instruments sound like that. Brent Hines is another one, like he's just such a wizard, and I think I'll be seeing him today. So
great.
Shout out to Brent.
Yeah, he's cut from a rock and roll cloth. He's a rock and roll outlaw.
Sure is. He sure is.
Great. He's on his own trip, and that's magical. That's a beautiful thing. Well,
yeah.
Thanks, John. Like it's always interesting. I like going into
it.
Thank you for joining us on the show today. This is the Revolver Fan First podcast. This is John Baizley, Baroness. They're going to put out some new music this year, I would imagine, which is exciting.
Yep.
And they're back on the road, which is fun.